Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. So I'm going to go, what we're going to do right now is I'm going to go through some of the basics of negotiation from materials and workshops that I've attended over the years. And then Tracy Gartner from Carthage is going to speak a little bit about her experiences. And AJ Sharma will speak about some of his. He's from Auburn University. And then we'll open it up for discussion. So right now you're seeing the first slide here, and the main goal of negotiation on here is that everyone should walk away feeling like a winner. We're all adults now. We are all really invested in maintaining relationships and establishing relationships. And so we need to, like, the goal of the negotiation should not be that you win over someone else, and you shouldn't let them win over you. We should all be able to walk away feeling like winners. The four main points that we'll talk a little bit more about in detail here are on the right. So you need to get information before and during negotiation. You need to ask for what you want. You need to be relentlessly pleasant. And you need to make helping you good for everyone else as well, to get to that goal of everyone walking away like a winner. So I don't know if you're seeing all of these. I'm sorry, I don't know how to stop that from coming up on my screen.
Yes, yes,
it looks good.
Okay, so for the first one, get information. You need to do your research before and during a negotiation. And there's some points on here that you can read through and we'll go through as well. The first one is don't ask what you can find out on your own. So when you go into a negotiation, you want to already have done that background research. If you can find out what the salaries are, if that's what you're negotiating, what the benefits that are potential are, what other potential colleagues have and are getting, you need to do as much as you can on your own before you get there. You don't want to be in a situation where you're asking them what, the goal of the organization is when that's right on their website, because then you're not presenting yourself well. You can and should ask for more information about it. So, if you have questions about something specific, you can absolutely follow that up if it's not something that you could find on your own. Look up salaries or benefits prior to meeting. So know what is possible. You want to know what the playing field is before you get involved and you ask for way too much money or you ask for way too little money. So trying to find that out, internet searches are great. Also, speaking with the people at the organization already is really helpful. If you have a connection already, or you can cold call people or work through your network. Understand what the goals of the organization are and how you're going to fit in. How are you going to add to them? Being able to talk about where you're coming from and how you're helping them is a big way to establish trust and bond and help the negotiation. Find ways that your needs align with their goals. So how are their goals going to be improved by you meeting your goals? Those are things that you want to have and know before you go into that negotiation. The next two are more about what you do during the negotiation. You need to keep getting that information. So listen to them for real during the negotiation. And this is not as simple as it seems, because in a negotiation, most humans are really pretty conflict averse. It's very difficult to get out of your own head and stop worrying about what you're going to say next and think about what they're saying to you. Taking notes can really help with that, but trying to really listen to them. And then the last one is taking notes. So when you're taking notes, summarize them, send that back in an email. Do your research during the negotiation, make sure that everybody is in agreement with that. Okay, so the next one is a big one. Ask for what you want. This is also not easy. It's especially not easy for some people, but there's many different steps to asking what you want, and going through them will help you out. So first of all, think about what you want ahead of time. Think about what you really want. Think about what is going to make you happy and make you a productive member of that organization. And then also know what your best alternative is to a negotiated agreement. So do you already have a job somewhere? If they can't meet what you want, are you just going to stay at your current job? Or are you going to be happy with, a lower pay rate or something at the new job? Are you just going to have to be unemployed? At which point you might have to take less than you had initially hoped. What is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement? Go into the discussion with 4 or 5 things that you want. So in that process of thinking what you want and knowing what your alternatives are, you should be able to narrow this down to 4 or 5 main things. So that, for example, of a salary negotiation of a new job, salary is really important, but let's see, benefits are really important. Number of vacation days can be really important. Sick leave could be important if that's an issue for you, but also other things like I negotiated once for having a window office because that really helped my mental health. You can negotiate for having parking spaces or preferred location, preferred spots in a campus daycare if you're talking about a university. There are all kinds of things that you can negotiate that other people may have or may not even have thought of. So sometimes you're going to be limited on some of the things you want, but there are other things. So of those 4 to 5 things that you want, 1 or 2 of those things should be something that are nice to have, but that you're willing to give up. So when you're thinking about your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, do you really need a window office? Do you really need a close parking space? Or are you going to be okay without those? Because one of the ways that you get to everybody walking away happy is that they feel like they won something too. So if you go in with 4 to 5 things and one of them is really what you want, and the second one is you really do want that one, but not as much as the first one. But there's things that you're willing to let go. That's always important. And knowing which ones are which is really important too. And then the last one is putting your number on the table first, if possible. That's called an anchor. Because of human psychology, whatever number is on the table first in terms of benefit or salary or whatever, the discussion tends to go around that. And so if you start with a really low number, it's very difficult to get it higher up. That does mean that you have to have done your research ahead of time. And you can also present that number, especially for salary, as something that's good for both you and the organization. This is especially important in many cases for women who tend to get penalized for talking about money and asking for salaries if you cannot focus this around the conversation. And I'll point out some ways that you can phrase that later. This one seems very silly, but being relentlessly pleasant and showing respect is really critical. And everyone going into negotiation is feeling the same thing that you are. Humans are in general conflict averse. Everyone is going to be a little stressed, even though if they think this is going to be a walk in the park. So you're just having a mental decision to just be pleasant the whole time, no matter what happens, is really important. So there's a few different suggestions on here and ways to do that. So for one, give a true compliment. And this can be about the organization itself. It can be about the office space that they bring you into, anything, like you're trying to establish rapport with the people that you are negotiating with. That's the second one, is identify mutual interest in the first few minutes. When you are meeting somebody in their office, in the preliminary stages of negotiation, you can look at pictures that they have and other things that they have in their office to see if there's, both of you really like kayaking. Talking about kayaking in the first couple of minutes is going to bring down the stress level, forge a connection between you, and make the negotiation a lot easier. Sit straight. So the presence one. Sitting straight, your feet on the floor, your hands on the desk or table, and looking right at them makes a big difference. It means that you're present. They interpret your body language to mean that you're present. You are present for them. They are important to you, and you are taking this seriously and paying attention. Part of that is, it goes without saying, you should be dressed appropriately for this interview, whatever negotiation session that you're in. If in general, if you don't know what that is, dress a little nicer than you think it's going to be necessary, but you can always find out. This is part of your research, trying to find out from people that already work there what is expected, so that you show up with the right presentation. The listening part. So emphasize that you are listening to them. And we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but ways that you can do this specifically are saying things like, let me go back to something you said a minute ago. And then you can rephrase one of your needs in the view that they had in their, in their set of needs. So you can restate your goals in terms of what's important to them. And you can also, if they say something that's, contrary to what you want, you can say things like, well, you make a valid point. You're acknowledging that you listen to them. You're emphasizing that you listen to them. Also pause. A negotiation can be something closer to a 10-act play. It does not have to happen at once. If people are trying to pressure you to make a decision quickly, you can ask them things like, could you please tell me more about why it's so important that we do this quickly? but you should be able to say, you've given me some great information. I'd like to think about it. Can we speak again tomorrow or in a couple of days? Negotiations don't have to all happen at once. So the last point is make helping you good for everybody. So you have to realize that a lot of people's problem with negotiation is based around the fact that they just feel uncomfortable doing it. They feel like they shouldn't. They feel like they're really excited for this job and they're willing to take whatever they get, and they're sure the organization is going to take care of them if it's a job. If it's a benefit, they're sure that you work really hard at whatever job it is, and people are going to notice, and they're just going to give you that raise, and they're going to give you that promotion. That's very unlikely to be the case. People are all worried about their own situations and their own problems, but you need to realize that you are not going to work your best and do your best and do the best for the organization if you are not happy in what you are getting. So you are not going to help them reach their goals. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them if you are not advocating for yourself and initiating negotiations when they have to happen. The other thing is that negotiation is expected. This is absolutely true for jobs. In general, a company or a university or wherever, they're not going to offer you the top salary that you can expect there. They're going to offer you a salary lower than that with the expectation that you are going to negotiate. There are exceptions, I'm sure, but in general, negotiation is expected. And if there's something that cannot be negotiated, there are, for a lot of public universities and for a lot of corporate situations, there's very clear rubrics that determine what your salary is going to be. If that's the case, you are expected to negotiate on everything else: window offices, parking spots, whatever is important to you. Also, when you're going in to help everybody feel good about it, you should think about multiple options that can solve the issue. So in terms of salary, if there's really strict rules about what they can pay you, sometimes they can give you signing bonuses. That is very common in the private sector, to get a signing bonus to help make up for whatever you were hoping to get for your salary. There's multiple options that can solve your problems. If you go in with multiple options, and then it becomes more of a conversation and not an antagonistic interaction. And then there's 3 quotes here for ways that you can phrase, examples of ways that you can phrase your needs in terms of the organization. So how can I be successful for the organization? And I know you want me to succeed, so why are you offering me so little money? Or why can you not give me the money that I need to set up my lab appropriately? If I don't have the equipment, I am not going to succeed for the organization. I want to make a commitment, and then especially around the salary one. And if you are feeling comfortable about that, or you are afraid that you're going to be viewed poorly, I really want to make a commitment to you. I want to get this right the first time. I want everybody to be happy, and I need more money for that to happen. I need something approaching this. The last one here is to make helping you good for everybody. Don't negotiate over email or text. It is too easy to misinterpret what somebody says. Do take notes and follow up with them, over email, and just make sure everybody's in agreement, but have every conversation on the phone or in person, because it's just too easy to just misinterpret. And there's one final point. This is not a natural thing for most of us to do. Negotiating is hard. It takes preparation and it takes practice. Just like for sport, you can practice this. You can learn to sit at a table with your feet on the floor and your hands on the table. Maybe if you're a really jittery person like I am, that is actually something difficult that I've had to practice. You can have a friend of yours ask you questions. You can do the research and give it to them, and let other people talk you through fake interviews. The more that you practice it, the better you're going to get. So think about this and talk about what it is that you want. What is your best alternative? Talk it through with other people and make sure that you are ready to go before you have to get into the actual negotiations. So now I am going to stop sharing slides so that our faces get a little bigger. And I'm going to pass it off to Tracy.
All right. Hello, I'm Tracy Gartner. I'm from Carthage College, and I've been teaching at Carthage for, I think, 18 years now. And I wish I would have had a talk like this 18 years ago, right? And we certainly can look back and say, well, when we were negotiating our jobs, we certainly would go back and we would do that differently. But as I was reflecting and thinking about preparing comments for this, I realized that it's not just negotiation that happens at the very beginning of your career. And I think about things that I have negotiated for over the 18 years that maybe aren't salary, but are things like an office space, a lab space, a sabbatical time. I recently negotiated to take a sabbatical a year early. And so we can talk about sort of ways to do that. Leadership positions, maybe a summer bonus for something you're working on. So I think we have this idea that negotiation is this big thing that happens. And I realize that we are doing that all the time, taking into account some of these things that Lise just talked about. And so I'll echo some of the things that she said. I think in places where people are successful negotiators for their department, for themselves, they do assess what they want. Is it space? Is it time? Is it a course release? Is it something for your department? What is it that you're thinking that you need? And maybe one of the things that's different is I'm not going to go necessarily in with my list of 4 or 5 in that particular case. I'm negotiating for a particular thing. But I am considering how I'm going to help the college. And I'm considering how this thing that I'm asking for is going to influence the college above and beyond me. So in the case of a sabbatical, for example, we put together a sabbatical proposal. We say, this is what we are going to be doing over that period of time. This is what I'm bringing back to the students, the college, the community. This is why it has to happen now. So there's a whole bunch of the arguments that need to be put together for that sort of negotiation. Before going into a negotiation, you want to consider why they might say no. So what are the reasons against them saying yes to the things that you're asking for? And are there arguments that you could make that can counter those reasons? So knowing sort of what the college is thinking or what the job is thinking in terms of what the norms are for the things that you're asking for, what is typical for people to get based on the things that you're asking for, is useful, doing that background research as Lise was talking about. But thinking about those, understanding the opposite side is always so important for supporting your own side, right? And it's the same sort of thing in this particular case. And then finally, I guess I would add to Lisa's wonderful list that I think it's useful as we consider those negotiations that happen over a career, particularly if you're in the same type of career, the same institution, same organization for a long period of time, it's useful to pick your battles. If you are going in to your boss every single week and you're asking for something all the time, you might end up not being quite as successful as thinking through carefully what sorts of things are most meaningful, most influential for both you and the organization. So that I guess I will end my comments there. I'm happy to chat more, but I'm going to turn it over to AJ.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Well, Lise and Tracy covered most of the stuff. I won't take much time, and we'll give ample time to others to ask questions. But I would emphasize a couple of things. One, that Lise also said that negotiation is expected. I know when I was, during my first job, and I see many other people, they are just scared of this idea, especially if you're new. Oh, negotiation. Well, first of all, it is expected and you must do it. Okay, the other person knows. If you don't negotiate, just accept it. I don't think it's a good impression. They'll say, oh, well, we are able to give more. This person probably, does not know how to negotiate. This is expected. Don't feel bad about it. Feel confident. And second, that it is really, really important. Even if you can negotiate your salary by $1,000, don't think it is just $1,000. It is a lot more than that. Your $1,000, because your all benefits, your retirement benefits, your insurance benefits are indexed to your base salary. If it increases by $1,000, next year's raise is based on your previous years, and you're indexed to all other benefits. if you do all these things, I did some calculation, your just 1,000 increase in salary over your career of 30 years probably ends up becoming $65,000 benefits, right? Your next job will be based on your previous job. The best negotiation thing is your current salary when you go for next job. So your current salary will be higher if you negotiate well, and that will lead to greater salary in the next job also. So it is very, very important. Small negotiation is also very important. So fundamentally, understand this. It is important, very, very important. Small negotiations are important, it is expected. And second, keep a good attitude. Keep yourself employable, that you are desirable to other employers. Okay, you will keep on getting raises. You will keep on getting all those things. Don't feel yourself married to your organization. And even in academia, I have an experience of urban universities. The best way to get a raise or negotiate your salary while you already have is to get another job offer, right? So keep yourself employable, valuable, and your life trajectory should be nice financially. There are a lot of things I can talk about, but some benefits are negotiable, some are not. For example, you cannot negotiate your retirement benefits or how much your 401k contribution, employer contribution would be. These are non-negotiable. These are decided either by state or by the whole organization. Some things are negotiation, but it's not only about salary and some benefits. Look at the tax situation of your state, look at the city taxes and all other things that can fundamentally change the whole dynamics of negotiation. So be informed and consider all things in totality when you negotiate. Information is power here. But I think we can answer your questions. That perhaps is the best way to go, rather than just me talking,
Thanks, Tracy and Ajay. Does anybody that's in the audience like to ask a question? Or provide other comments or other feedback or other experiences?
We have a comment in one of the comments in the chat is there any advice for when salaries are not publicly listed? How do we go about asking colleagues about this without seeming invasive? And there is a follow-up that says, and what about non-university work settings like NGOs and consultants?
I can answer the non-invasive part of that. I've asked for people for a salary range, like what is the ballpark salary that I can expect, or do you know a ballpark salary? And then they're free to give you their own salary and not tell you it's their salary, or give you something nearby. But I think people expect that question too.
Mm-hmm. And I can say, even if salaries are not publicly listed, you can definitely find online sort of bands of what, rough salary ranges. They're pretty broad sometimes, and it really depends on where you're at in terms of your training and experience. But at least it provides a start. But then it's really important to create those networks of colleagues who are willing to disclose.
And I think when you lack this information, you should tend to little bit overvalue yourself, not undervalue. Overestimate a little bit. And, rather than underestimating. First of all, understand, if somebody has decided to hire you, believe me, they're not gonna let you leave just because you asked $5,000 more. Okay. So at least in our one university setup, a committee is formed, they conduct a national search, they select a candidate, and a candidate is recommended to the dean. Believe me, if that candidate is asking for $10,000 more, just because he's asking for $10,000 more, deans will not hire them. Let me tell you, it will not happen. They will keep on talking with the candidates. So if you do not know the salaries, err on the side of overestimating yourself. Of course, it depends on a person's situation also. A fresh candidate student or a postdoc for so many years, they probably will lack some confidence in those kind of situations. So you have to tread carefully in some situations, but still, it is expected. And if you play the game well, you won't lose the job. You will win it in a way.
Tracy, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment, and maybe it's a question, but I've heard some people comment that when you don't necessarily know the exact range, that it's reasonable to put yourself within a percentage. So you can say, well, given my experience, I would expect to earn in the top 10% or in the top 20% or something along those lines. I don't know if anybody has had experience with that and can comment on that, but I have heard others use that as a range when you can't find the exact numbers.
There's also a whole series of questions in the chat right now about what to do if something is fixed and you can't change it. So, you know, for example, the salary is fixed by the organization, and if they pay you more, then you get fewer hours to work. Or there's one about consulting also, and government salaries too. So when they're fixed salaries, what can you do? I can answer the one about consulting since I'm in consulting. If you're negotiating for a job, you definitely should negotiate as hard as you can without making people angry at you. But you can ask other colleagues what the range is that you should expect and go from there. When you're asking for raises or promotions, at least in the private sector, your value to the organization is based entirely on two things: how good you are at your job, how well you're doing for the organization already, and how much of a flight risk you are. So, you know, when you really like the company that you're working at, even if you plan to stay there forever, don't tell people that. One trick that people do is, you know, a lot of us get contacted by recruiters. Just happen to mention that you got contacted by recruiters to a few people. I mean, that's not saying you're leaving, but it does make you come up as somebody who's good and has a potential flight risk. And as Jay said, getting another job offer sure helps with that too. In consulting, in consulting at least, and I applied for government jobs too, the salaries are in a range for each position level. So your education and your background will land you in a position level, and there is some room for negotiation within that position level. That's true for other private sector companies as well that I know of.
There's a question in the chat. Do you have advice or tips for negotiating remote work? In this particular case, where all the work that can be completed remotely and meetings are already held with a Zoom option for other team members who are remote.
Yeah, I hired somebody recently who wanted to do remote work, even though they were local to the area that I was working in. And, you know, they were a really great candidate and we really wanted them, and they wanted to be listed as fully remote and said they'd still come into the office once in a while. And that was not a deal breaker. So I think when you're making that list of things that you want, you know, those 4 or 5 things, how important is that to you? And if that's really important, then you have to have that as one of your main points of negotiation.
And I think, and to add to that, I mean, if it's depending on what the work, if it's a particular work with a particular product, making sure that you can estimate right from the beginning what the real hours are going to be, the real scope of the time that you're going to have to do the job that is expected by the employer. Because it's, you know, if it's hidden work, if it's not seen, it's often seen as not as much as it actually is. And in some ways, it's the same problem that artists have in valuing their labor, because a lot of it is invisible. And so making sure that it's very clear to, if you're contracting with someone, that to the person who's hiring you, who usually has a very good idea, but if they don't, making it very clear what the scope of the work is going to be to complete it in a way that's adequate.
So I'd like to encourage anybody that wants to put on their camera and get on the microphone and ask a question. You're welcome to do that too. This is supposed to be a chat. So please feel free to do that. We don't have to do this entirely by chat here. I did see one comment until somebody comes on. Did see there's one more comment here about how many people in the room have experienced negotiating the conditions of their fundamental quality of life. The person that posted that wants to come on and explain a little bit more about what they're specifically talking about. That would be great. If not, we can start wild guessing. Go ahead, Tracy.
I can wild guess a response and then talk a little bit about, I think the life of a career is long, as particularly in academia, right? And we go through lots of different stages of our life. And so when I've gone through periods of, I had children, and when you have young children, you might have different needs than when you do not have young children at home. So when I did not have young children, I was willing to be in the office for long hours, willing to do lots of things on weekends, all of those things. I'm no longer willing to do that. So I require, given my stage of life, I require more flexibility. So I guess part of my comment in response is, yes, I've negotiated those things, but I also would suggest that we don't always negotiate at the same level for everything that we need. So in academia, for example, sometimes it's fine to work that out with your department chair and not necessarily go up to the president of the institution to navigate that, right? So depending on what your needs are, you may be talking to different people. Sometimes it's getting a colleague to cover something for you, sometimes, and in exchange for covering something for them sometimes, right? Or sometimes it's working out, I will be on campus these 4 days of the week, and I will not be on campus this day of the week, so I can go off and do my research, or I can go off and do family things that I need to do, depending on life stage, right? So I think in those particular cases, those are sort of small potato kinds of things that you can ask, but that have huge meaning for well-being of life.
I had to second that. I mean, when I need to have changes to what I'm doing based on my personal life, I just talk to my manager, and we usually have worked it out. And that, you know, I would encourage people to try their manager first, because I mean, you can often find team members that'll help to cover what's needed.
My wife was able to negotiate doubling her tenure clock time in order to slow it down so that she could spend time with our children. And, you know, the choice was they could retain her as a faculty member with a slower tenure clock, or she would leave. And they wanted her to stay, so that they were able to negotiate that.
There's a tough question in here about dealing with pay inequality issues and regional cultural impacts, where individuals from certain demographic groups can be undervalued or devalued regardless of your output and achievements. Somebody want to try that one?
Yeah, this is, this is unfortunate, and it's very true. I don't think the person himself can do much about it. That's where the role of universities as institutions come into play. Lately, if you see, most universities have started publishing their salary ranges in the advertisements. Because it's very well known that women employees are paid less than male employees for the same job, and also that thing varies with other demographics. So they have started putting under their several initiatives of equity that this is the range that is paid. So when you are in a negotiation time, this is the range where you are valued, and then you negotiate considering that. So it already brings in that this is the beginning point, and this is common to all. So I think that's a good negotiator. And another thing is then a lot of burden falls on that demographic minority person in a way, that they have their some quantitative data that kind of shows them where they exactly stand, and it's kind of end up proving everything in a way. It's unfortunate, very common, but I think employers should do something about it.
But also, I'd respond to that to say, if you feel for any reason that you are undervalued or unappreciated in the job that you're in, you should try to find a different position for any reason. But there are places that are very welcoming of individuals of all, genders and races and sexual orientations, and you should not feel that you are stuck where you are. There are places that are going to be happy to have you and are going to be very welcoming and excited about your contributions. And that's not, I realize that's not possible in all cases, but it is always something to consider.
Yep.
So does anybody want to come on and discuss this as a water cooler chat? Or should we keep going from the comments?
And I'm watching, if you want to raise your hand and pipe in, we're watching for that, but you can also jump in right now if you would like.
Okay, there's one here. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to answer one of the last ones here that's stemming from that. If you find out about a pay gap after your hiring date, is it possible to negotiate during your annual contract renewals? And I definitely have experience working with this. So I've hired a lot of people and supervised a lot of people, and that does happen. And yes, you can negotiate that. Again, that's where, as Lee said, having information is helpful. Everything that you can show that there's a gap can help. I mean, we know that the lower you start in your salary, that perpetuates through your whole career at that institution. But it's also possible to make the case for there to be greater equity by equalizing if you are undercompensated compared to your peers.
Especially if you have any evidence that that is because of your being in some kind of a protected group. That is illegal.
Well, it's great if happens in your institutes or you have many examples to give. It would be nice if something like that, but I would still advise that you should negotiate the time when you join. Don't leave these things that can be corrected later on. It's actually, in my experience, very uncommon. You get stuck with it, especially in academia. Changing jobs is not easy. And I have many examples, so much disparity in salary. It all depends, how you negotiated at the beginning. Associate professors getting less than assistant professors and many things like that. You are not in a strong position at that time. So do your job better when you're negotiating, be informed, take your time. If somebody's pressuring you, hey, would you accept? We need to know right away. No, they don't need to right away. Ask though, I need to talk with my, dad, wife, son, whatever. I need a week and do all the research, and another thing that, a lot of things are negotiated and not everything goes into writing in a way, right? And if they become like informal handshakes or personal understanding, those things, many of those things just die after you sign contract. So even if does not become a part of your final offer letter, it must be somewhere either in emails or anywhere, right? You don't negotiate on emails, but when you have all these things, you can write an email saying, okay, just to make understand correctly, right? Everything is in the email, then send it somewhere, because you might have some informal handshakes with your chair or dean. And after 2 months, that dean went on to become provost of some another university. And next, another dean said, well, I don't know what you negotiated. There's nothing documented. So some things can get tricky. You need to be very, very smart, I would say, and put pretty much everything in writing that you can. Fixing things later on, if it works, great, but you are in a weaker position. Very weak position. Another thing, in academia, many times I have seen that if you negotiate for your salary, the department chair or dean would try to negotiate, hey, I can put more money in your program or your startup, but not salary. Okay, a person might have different opinions on that, but no, you want more salary, not startup, because salary is indexed to everything. Startup dies after some time. And if you have a couple of grants, you don't need startup really, right? And salary, that will change your trajectory, not startup. So a lot of those things, it's important to understand how it impacts you in long term. because especially in academia, changing jobs is not easy. You might be stuck there for a lifetime. So be careful, you know.
I'd follow that up. There's somebody that was, so there was a couple of questions in the comments about getting a written record. You do need a written record, and it should, if it's important to you that it is in the contract, you need to say that. So the person that works with me wanted that remote work in the contract, even though we're a very flexible company, would have been fine anyway. We said sure, so it's in the contract, you know, so there's no misunderstanding going forward, and that's definitely needed in writing. There's another comment here about somebody who's been working in a tech position and they've been offered another position at a higher rate. And how do they approach the PI of the lab they're currently working with so they don't burn bridges because they might want to work with them later? There's nothing wrong with wanting and needing more money. So first off, think about that. You should want more money. The person will understand that there's not, you're not a fundamentally bad person because you want more money. How you approach them with it is you can go to them and say, hey, I really like working with you. I really like working with this lab, but unfortunately I was just offered this position, or unfortunately I was just offered this position in another lab at a higher rate. I'd really rather stay with you. Is there any way that you can match it? You know, unfortunately for my situation, rent, whatever, I'm going to have to take a higher paid position if we can't work it out, you know, and you can just be apologetic. All right, Kelly, I got a hand up.
Yeah, I already asked a question in the chat, but I actually have a different one that I was curious your take on. So I work for a nonprofit organization, and they have been very comfortable and flexible with allowing full-time staff to go to graduate school part-time. And this is something that I've pursued, and I have an acceptance letter. However, they want to start a new policy where they have you sign a contract that you'll stay with the organization after you're done with your graduate school. What is a reasonable assumption for you to negotiate in that contract for more, you know, say pay or benefits after you actually get that new degree?
That's a great question. Somebody else want to take a stab at it?
Kelly, are they paying for the degree as well, or are they only letting you have the time to do it?
I will be applying for my own grants. So they will be going through the organization, but it will, you know, be my grants that I apply for.
So your employer is not paying for you? Would not be paying for the tuition or anything?
No, the money will be moved through the organization, but not directly paid for by any, like, say, unrestricted funds that was, you know, generated by them. It would be probably mostly federal funding.
So I think probably need to think about what it is that you want. Do your research, find out what other people at your current organization that have that degree make as a starting salary, right? New with that degree, and go to them with that. If they're not willing to meet that, you know, so there is in writing an expectation that yes, you will stay for 2 more years after you get your degree or whatever, that you will then be paid at the new rate as soon as you do obtain that degree. I mean, that seems like a reasonable win-win situation for the whole organization, because otherwise you're going to be resentful, you're not going to do a good job, and you're probably going to leave.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat that says, do any of the speakers, and I'll say anybody at this water cooler, this is open to everyone, incorporate any kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility work in their scientific work? And if so, have you attempted to negotiate monetary compensation for it? It's unique experience, and it's typically undervalued and can take time away from the scientific work. And that is. And the questioner, if you want to jump in and clarify or add to that, please do.
It's a great skill which is valued in many universities and organizations. And definitely, I think you can make a case for it, that you promote those diversities, and you should be kind of valued for that.
in the private sector, many companies have diversity and inclusion groups that are associated with work somehow. So we have a Pacific Northwest in the Seattle office. We have a Pacific Northwest EDI group that meets and thinks of activities and outreach things that we can do to engage folks in our office. And we produce the EDI moments for each of our staff meetings once a month. We give some information to folks. It's not really part of the science, but it's part of what we do as our company, and I participate in that group. We also have like a women of color group, and other private sector groups also have these kinds of things that you can do. There's also a whole lot of consulting going on now that's environmental justice related, and the overburden of toxic chemicals and air pollution in poorer regions. So that's not part of my personal practice, but we do a lot of that at Ramble as well. Carmen, you've got something.
Yes, what I was going to say, it's definitely the people involved in that kind of work, from my own experience, you're doing it without, additional compensation, and it does take a lot of time. It may be that at the beginning, when you're hired and you're a member of a historically underrepresented group, you use this as a way of becoming an asset to the organization if they value it, and it has to be in the mission. Keep that in mind, that just because you're hired doesn't mean that they actually value it. But if they do value it, then your department chair, if you're working, or supervisor, maybe the advocate saying, you're giving this person too much of this type of committee work, or, taking too much time for that. And he or she needs more time to work on research and teaching issues. And so, it's sort of, that's an ongoing negotiation to not be assigned all of these extra duties. But it's a constant struggle and that's why we have papers that show that this is an issue. Literature shows that. So but it can be an asset at the very beginning. But then you may be the only person expected to teach the environmental justice courses if you're in that kind of a situation, or do the environmental justice projects, and they may require a lot more work than other types of courses. So it is what it is. And if you're in a university or a state where that's not valued at all, yes, don't argue for that.
Tracy?
I was just going to add that this is similar. I think DEIJ is really important, and it's certainly one example of the type of extra things that scientists do. Number of us are also engaged in citizen science, community outreach, environmental justice work, as Carmen and Lise were saying. So there are a number of different ways that work that we do takes extra time and extra energy. And I think in those particular cases where I have found colleagues being most successful at negotiation is if they can find a way to sort of elucidate how what they are doing meets the mission of the college in some way. So if there is a DEIJ mission at the college, then certainly that is a negotiation tool. If there is part of the mission is outreach and community engagement, then that's a negotiation tool. So it's sort of doing the research to think and reflection to think about, well, what is it that I offer and how is that related to some of the various things that the college, the institution, the organization is wanting.
You should try to sell anything that you do that meets any mission of your university to ask for a raise or anything, whether it is DIG or anything. You should use all these things, but fundamentally understand this is a money game. It's a money game. If somehow what you are doing is leading to some monetary benefits to college and this, then it becomes very easy to ask for a raise than otherwise. Otherwise, it's a struggle. It's a money game, which in other words becomes external grants with a lot of IDCs. It becomes very, very easy to ask for raise than potentially any other work that you do. That is the fundamental truth, at least in academia, So yes, you should try to sell everything that you can, DEIJ efforts or any initiatives that you do with community outreach or anything. But believe me, it is a money game at the bottom.
So thank you everybody for joining us. Reiterate that this was recorded, so this will be available online. And also all of us are scientists here and are good at researching. And I went to the library and in a few minutes, I got a bunch of books about negotiating. So if there's a whole science about how people think and how people discuss and how people come to decisions. And if you need more feedback, you can also reach out to your local library and get some of the books that are available about negotiating. And I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to finish this off.
So thank you so much. Again, this has been an excellent discussion and an exchange of questions and comments. And we're really happy that we are able to put this together for you. So once more, I want to thank especially the ESA Education Committee that has talked about this and really wanted to put this together, especially Tom for moderating the chat, and Liz for doing all the slides and bringing all the tips to our community, and of course to Ajay and to Tracy for all your contributions as well. So just for everybody's information, we will have the video recording posted, and I will notify you when that's ready. And as I understand, there's also going to be another ESA webinar or event later this fall about negotiation. So be on the lookout for that as well. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody and wish you a very good evening.
Thank you.